think that we're wired for clutter. And it takes a lot of work to unclutter the mind to think clearly about things. That's why we're in one of the reasons we're in the fucking catastrophe we are now.
And it's the idea that the elite that we presently have is not even interested in that problem.
The elite. I've noticed your vocabulary is quite good. And I've noticed when I speak to educated Brits, their vocabulary is quite good. But when I speak to educated Americans, their vocabulary is also good. But it's always like, Andrew Doyle, he's a good friend of mine.
Yeah.
Almost every time I talk to him, he'll say a word, and I'll be like, oh, wow. I mean, I know the word. I'm like, wow, I've only seen it written. Why do you think that educated Brits have such good vocabularies? And your epistemology should precede everything. And that's why I'm a little bit suspicious, to say the least, of this imposition of some external structures on the way people think about things to navigate reality.
Then you can increasingly derange them.
Derange them?
Yeah.
What do you mean derange them?
I think that should give us courage, exposure to other people's perspectives.
It's moving us in a good direction.
Who's Dominic Cummings and why should anybody care?
Dominic Cummings is a sort of folk devil or folk hero in British political history, depending on who you ask. He was the man who got Brexit, and then 5 years later, he was the man who got Brexit done and solved the impasse. He is a very intelligent special advisor to former Prime Minister Boris Johnson, who figured out a lot of the plumbing in terms of building great teams and making government organizations actually do things. Because most of the time, government organizations kind of don't do anything. Politicians push the lever and nothing happens. And Dominic Cummings has, in his semi-retirement, become a bit of an avatar of a movement, which you might loosely call techno-populism.
Techno-populism, what's that?
Well, it's the idea that we can do better by importing management theory and methods and technology from what you might predominantly call Silicon Valley in order to make institutions function better. And it's the idea that the elite that we presently have is not even interested in that problem.
The elite?
Yes.
Yeah. So why pull from Silicon Valley and not China?
Well, that's an interesting question. I guess it just goes back to the literature, the kind of Peter Drucker people, the kind of Paul Graham people who've been...
Paul Graham, good man.
Yes, who've been, writing and thinking about these questions. The Jeff Bezos people have figured out how you do things with large organizations, how you scale. Silicon Valley is obsessed with scaling. And I'm sure China has scaling, but I've never read anything about it, and I'm guessing others do.
So if someone's in their home or in their car in Kansas and they're listening to this and they're like, Dominic Cummings, are there any lessons to be learned from the story of Dominic Cummings to the United States or to the people of Western Europe?
Well, you have a kind of a proto, or maybe even a kind of a more matured Dominic Cummings in the form of Elon Musk's DOGE right now.
Interesting.
So what's happening with DOGE, as far as I can see, is that they are ripping out the plumbing on the federal infrastructure, and they are making less and less and less of it. And that is in turn not just driving efficiency in terms of cost baseline, but it is also driving a kind of efficiency just in terms of government systems. So Cummings had this famous blog called The Hollow Men.
Which Substack.
Well, that was pre-Substack,
Okay.
but I think it's been replicated on his Substack now, which talked about his time at the Department for Education in
the US?
In the UK.
In the UK.
Yeah, but there he was working for the Minister, Michael Gove, and every time he famously says that they pulled another dozen people and just canned them, the department got better. Efficiencies improved. One, because you're getting rid of, I guess, troublemakers or people who just say no all the time. Two, because most organizations are just full of this kind of interstitial middle management sponge, government bureaucracies especially. And once you can kind of pull that out, things get better and better. And that's the sort of parallel I see with DOGE. And that's the sort of, continual problem, continual balancing act that is happening in large companies around middle management.
So my first thought was I worry about cronyism. A boss doesn't like an employee, or there's something else going on there, and then there's kind of some sort of retributory, you're fired. Or is that just silly?
Sure. I mean, that is probably a bit silly, because I guess you have to at some point in the system assume that...
Are you calling me silly?
Yeah, sure, yeah. Why not? I mean, you're just swearing at me in Hungarian. I mean, we have a certain rapport. I mean, I wouldn't like to get into a ground level
really
fight
coming
with you.
along. Yeah. Okay, so what's your take on DOGE?
I think it's generally a net positive, isn't it? I mean, I just
That's
think...
my current thinking, yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
But it's funny, it's, if somebody goes to the DMV, every American, the Department of Motor Vehicles, I'll just translate that just in case, complains constantly about the DMV, constantly about the law. I don't know a single person who's like, yeah, I went to the DMV, got in, got out, everything was great. So you do need some services. You need fire services, and you need the best people in those positions. And, whether it's, I have to renew my passport, and I'm thinking to myself, oh man, it's going to be much. And I don't know, there's just something about there's such an anti-government, just an animus against the government now, and against, I don't want to say bureaucracy, but we need civil servants. We need the government. I mean, we need the Army, we need Border Patrol, we need the police, the fire.
But isn't this the eternal thing where, the system ultimately gets to a certain level and then begins to serve itself?
That's Weber's concept, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's Weber's concept. It's anyone who's sort of worked in any management or bureaucracy's concept. It's just organizations develop internal toxicities that expels people who are actually good. Cummings has this thing about people the civil service in Britain will get a lot of great people in at the age of 25, and then by 32 they kind of look up the chain, and the chain has an adverse selection mechanism in it. It is promoting the worst. You have to just play the game,
okay, let's linger on that. What do you mean they're promoting the worst? Is it because it's not subject to a market mechanism?
That is pretty much it, yeah. And, that you can't always argue against having a market mechanism in civil service. I mean, it seems like you do need bureaucracies to function for the benefit of the state, and those goals will always be blobby. To kind of get back to your point, there was a whole, the services that you mentioned, things like police and firefighting. Firefighting is generally pretty damn efficient because it has to be. It has a clear, linear goal that it is targeting.
Well, it wasn't in Los Angeles County. For real, they chose diversity over putting out fires.
Exactly that, yeah. And these kind of, manias and social contagions can kind of parasitize all kinds of orgs, yeah.
Yeah, I've actually wondered what the response of the people would be. I had a long conversation with someone about whether or not the goal of the fire department should be to put out fires. And it probably sounds crazy maybe not to you, but I think a lot of people don't think that that's the goal of the fire department. They think that the goal of the fire department is to have diverse representation among firefighters. And it's kind of a benefit if it puts out fires, but if not, oh well. Mm. So the Cummings thing, so how did you get interested in this? It seems, is it obscure or esoteric, or how did you get interested in it?
It's not very esoteric in England, no. I mean, Dominic Cummings, as I said, has been a figure in British politics for about 10 years in true prominence, but he's been kind of hanging around for 20 years.
Have you ever met him?
No. And right now, he is, kind of a lion in winter. He has this feeling of he will write these, he has sort of 10,000 Substack subscribers, and he will write these very dense, very kind of encoded
Do you read them?
Posts. Yeah.
Why do you read them? What does it give you to read them?
Just an insight into an intellectual depth and world and sort of ferocity of ideas that is hard to get in the British political world. And a certain insider take, I think he has predicted various things which have come to pass.
Like what?
Well, I guess that Kemi Badenoch would be a disaster as Tory leader,
interesting.
and that the Boris Johnson show would ultimately come apart. And he understood how to get Brexit done in 2019, and he took this sort of. He talks about this thing called the OODA loop. I don't know if you're aware of that.
No.
Observe, orient, decide, act.
Observe, orient, decide, act. Okay.
Yes. So this comes from a man called Colonel Boyd, who was a US fighter pilot, who was the kind of the greatest sort of peacetime pilot. He never actually fought in anger, but he was
Fought in anger. That's an interesting expression.
But he was a military strategist. He was kind of like a.
How do you make him great if you don't have any? Like, what makes him great? Does he do tricks, or I mean, usually you think
he
of
did do tricks, yeah.
Of great if it's like not being shot down, shooting down the enemy.
He did this thing called flattening the bird.
Okay.
Which is, have you seen Top Gun, the original Top Gun?
Yes.
So it's that maneuver where you just kind of like slide the plane
cool.
up, and then the opponent kind of goes underneath you. You just kind of take all of the G's out of it.
That's super cool.
Yeah. It's pretty damn cool.
Yeah. All right. So the OODA loop, or what is it?
OODA loop, yeah.
Yeah. What is that?
Observe, orient, decide, act.
Okay.
So basically, the OODA loop is, so Boyd has this sort of secondary kind of afterlife as a military theorist and sort of Clausewitz style. He's coming up with ideas. A lot of those ideas then went into the first Gulf War, and to some extent, I'm sure, carried through into the second Gulf War. He sort of died around that time. But so the OODA loop is the idea that everyone in a strategic engagement has sort of four processes. Just one way of thinking about those four processes. You observe what's happening, you orient yourself towards what's happening, you decide on the next course of action, and then you act, right? And if you can get, the theory goes, if you can get inside your opponent's OODA loop, if you can observe, orient, decide, and then act faster than them, if you can, work on each phase of that process, then you can increasingly derange them.
Derange them?
Yeah.
What do you mean derange them?
Well, you kind of knock them out of the game by being better than them on every point in that process, and and then start to make worse and worse decisions. Those decision-making processes compound, and gradually that sort of compounding advantage of being inside the OODA loop.
That's just not how I view reality. I mean, so you must be talking about a situation, because I just think we're all better off if we cooperate and help each other as opposed to get an OODA loop and try to derange our enemy. There's enough derangement. We don't need to additionally derange people.
Okay, well, let's think about it in terms of the 2016 Brexit referendum. Okay. So you have two sides. You have Vote Leave, who are about leaving the European Union, and then you have the Remain campaign, right? And every Friday, Cummings and his team would kind of sit down and they would game out how they were going to create strategic situations in the upcoming week's news cycle that would disrupt the Remain campaign's planned events. Okay. And it's that sense of being able to throw your opponent off course. You probably kind of know this from your martial arts training, I'm not sure, but it's about tacking left when they tack right, and then they are thrown off course. Yeah. And if you can do that more and more, and if you can focus on doing that and focus on not getting blown off what you want to do.
That's interesting. Yeah, I'm thinking about Plato's Republic and the laws and some other dialogues. In the Republic, he says, beating a horse does not make a better horse. Like it just, I don't know, there's just something about, I guess, thinking about it in a tactical way. I'm trying to make it make sense where one would want to do that. I guess thinking about it in a strategic or tactical way as opposed to attempting to reason with someone and listen to them. I guess I'm just thinking about how to move it out of that cooperative paradigm. Or am I thinking about it wrong?
Yeah, I don't think you would move it out of the competitive paradigm. I mean, it's a comparative frame. It's designed for war. It's the all against all world.
War would be different. Like if you're in a war situation, that would be totally different. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess you have to just then look at those micro interactions as wars. That seems in aggregate to make one a miserable bastard over time.
Well, I guess, I mean, if you think about it in terms of game theory, like there's always like the sub game and then the master game above that. And as you may know from the famous experiments with computers playing tic-tac-toe, there is a kind of an accept kind of equilibrium that comes to play in those kinds of endeavors. Yeah. But it's a tool in the toolkit.
So let's say that I had a machine. Let's say that a time traveler gave me a machine from the future. And with the machine came a wand, and I waved the wand over you, and all knowledge of Dominic Cummings and everything you'd ever read, or you just literally, it was just uprooted, extirpated from your brain. How would you be different?
Interesting. I guess I would be slightly less interested in certain business books. I mean, I think I'm interested in my sort of personal and professional life in management theory as a kind of a dogma, a philosophy, a kind of a worldview about kind of taking inputs and turning them into outputs.
What is management theory?
It's all kinds of things. I mean, like people do MBAs in this stuff. I mean, it's like everything from, I don't know, Peter Drucker is often considered one of the gurus of management theory, like that idea of management by objectives. Management by walking about is another version of that. You know, I guess it sort of starts in the early 20th century with like...
And management by walking about is you basically do just that. You display your managerial acumen, or you help people build teams, et cetera, by just walking about the organization, correct?
Yes, and by doing that, you pick up small cues. Right. You pick up information that you would otherwise, be lost to you. And good or great CEOs are quite good at just being in touch with the organization at all levels.
What are the three commonalities in management theory that you think are important for people to know? Are there the three things you've learned from that to help people?
I think... So Cummings talks about sort of speed being a virtue in and of itself, that it doesn't, you would think that being fast is, move fast and break things. You don't necessarily have to break things. Like there is a world in which like just doing everything at turbo speed has a kind of, boldness has a genius all of its own kind of version of that.
And that seems to apply to everything, not, like blitzkriegs. It seems to apply to like physical things, intellectual things, humor. If you even wait a few seconds after someone says something, it's not funny anymore.
Yes.
Like the best comics are just quick like that. Okay, so speed, what's something else?
Okay, well, you mentioned Blitzkrieg, and Blitzkrieg is quite instructive. So, the Stormtrooper model, which the German army invented in the last months of World War I, has become a kind of a defining paradigm for a lot of management theory, in that it's small teams that have objectives. So before that, you'd have, I guess, generals, and orders would be fed forward and back along the line. But the management by objectives version of that is that you have 6 or 12 people. There is a kind of a perfect number, and almost what you might call kind of a Dunbar's number of how many people you can have in a team before it starts to break down in its own way. Then those people are given objectives to satisfy. Take that hill would be the classic kind of Stormtrooper version of that. But they're not told how you take that hill, and they're not told exactly when you take that hill. That allows for the flexibility of the people with the most information, who are at the fringe, at the front line of that process, to react to events which no informational system, which ultimately is kind of what management is all about, could possibly do in real time.
And so the idea is to then take the lesson learned from that and see if you can universalize it and particularize it out to various activities.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Okay, so that's the second thing. What's one more thing?
One more thing, I guess, would be, Silicon Valley is obsessed with A players, and I can't quite recall who came up with the terminology. It might even be our friend Paul Graham. But the idea of A players, B players, and C players, and A players, I guess, would be defined as people who are productive and proactive, and B players are kind of people who go along to get along, and C players who just kind of want to exfiltrate. They're just kind of there.
Exfiltrate?
Yeah, just like get rid of them.
Yeah. It's just an interesting word. I've never heard it in that sense. Okay.
Well, just like, I guess the idea from that is that recruitment is everything. That a lot of companies they just sort of start up, and they're like, we have some people and we have an office, but actually you need to work on getting the people and creating, I don't know, the cognitive tests, the frame by which you analyze and find those people and the sort of networks through which you pull them up is your key task in your first, I don't know, 6 months of life.
So when I asked you about management theory, one of the things you said is that you think about it in your personal life too. Well, how does it affect your personal life? How do you use it in your personal life?
Well, I guess we're all trying. So, I mean, I think the world has moved towards this idea of optimization, and there's a kind of like a bro culture out there, isn't there? That you find in people like
I don't know, dude.
Timothy, but like, you know, people like Timothy Ferriss and Stephen Bartlett, Diary of a CEO, and I guess Andrew Huberman would be kind of a slightly different take on that.
Jocko Willink.
I think Jocko and Rogan are targeting something slightly different. I'd say Ferriss is maybe the godfather of this because he's the godfather of a certain kind of 80-20 kind of Pareto principle worldview where you kind of game the system. And, you know, the 4-hour work week, has it ever paid off for anyone? I wonder. But it's a seductive, propulsive idea, especially to men and young men in a hurry. And all that sort of stuff has kind of filtered through the culture of like, you need to hack. You know, YouTube is all about hacking. And I guess in that sense, time is the constraining factor. So how do I make more with less? And that is always going to be a subset of some kind of management theory.
So that's what you're trying to do in your personal life, make more with less?
Yeah, don't you?
No, I don't. I just don't think about it like that.
Okay. What do you think about?
It really is true. Like men are dogs and women are cats. One of these complicated. My personal life is remarkably uncomplicated.
Right.
I only have like 2 or 3 thoughts in my that go through my day at any one time.
Okay.
That's about it.
How wonderful.
I think.
How glorious.
Yeah.
Sometimes I sit and think, and sometimes I just sit. Is
Yeah,
that the vibe? Yeah.
Well, I mean, you know, I think about whatever I'm working on, and then I think about, I don't know, I just do not, I'm just a big fan of parsimony. You know, I'm just a big fan of making things. Is like my apartment here in Budapest. It's just a studio with I've been traveling since August with one bag and a backpack. Mm-hmm. So I'm just a fan of like uncomplicated relationships with people, uncomplicated everything. Just so I did an event actually here, right where we are now, and somebody started walking out with me, and I was talking to people as we were going out, and the next thing I know, he was going up in this elevator with me. I'm like, to the restaurant that's right down the road. And so I'm like, well, okay, we're here. I was just going to do some work on my phone. And then he starts telling me about like all of this stuff about his youth. And I mean, that's, you know, when people see their videos, they think they know you. And so they just start talking to you, which is fine with me, you know? So, I mean, but it was just interesting. And he had all this trauma. And he said, what do you think about that? And I said, I could not imagine living my life in a way that I would impose all of this external stuff to try to figure out past stuff. Like I would look at these filters and then go to therapy. And then like, I just try to, it's just too much. It also adds static when you're trying to work through a very, like I try to work through very complicated problems. Like, I mean, I don't want to make the interview about me. You asked the question,
Sure.
But every time you do something like that, like have a management theory, it seems to me that you're injecting static into the process by which you're mediating the thought by something other than pure reason. And I'm not talking about empirical pieces that lend evidence by which one can formulate a theory or a hypothesis across a kind of theoretical landscape. I'm talking about like, I just think it's a problem. I think that we're wired for clutter, and it takes a lot of work to unclutter the mind to think clearly about things. That's why we're in one of the reasons we're in the fucking catastrophe we are now.
Wait, because of too much theory?
Yeah, because, you know, Pinker talks about it, because the moral mind is in hyperdrive. You know, people don't do bad things because they're bad people. They do bad things because they're trying to be good people. And so they have that, there's a theoretical lens through which interpretive lens through which they strap on to their worldview, and then that mediates their action and causes them to do some pretty deranged shit.
Well, I guess you could talk about the whole of the 20th century as the rise of theory, and the idea that I guess the universities have become madrasas of theory.
Correct.
That has become completely detached
Right,
from
that's
reality.
making my point,
and
right.
indeed is kind of
Yeah.
yeah. But there is good and bad in theory, and surely the point is that you mediate your instincts, you reconcile your instincts with reality at some point, and your theory should, the theory of gravity is incredibly clarifying and it's incredibly short.
Yeah, the theories are good for large-scale or even small-scale scientific enterprises. I'm much more suspicious and skeptical when you talk about imposing theories or structures. It just damages the immediacy of the experience of the world and of your own thinking, because your thinking is then always mediated by something exogenous to what you're thinking about.
Well, no, I mean,
It's like God. It's like thinking like I had a conversation with this kid yesterday, and he kept asking me, a mutual friend of ours, a great kid, I really, really like him quite a bit, and he kept asking me questions about God. He's Christian, his dad's Christian, and it again struck me as, why inject static into a system? Like, why would you do that? It doesn't even make any sense. It's almost always going to prevent you from thinking clearly about something.
Because I don't know if you read, I don't know, a great book, let us say Crime and Punishment or whatever, you take something away from that. It leaves
Right.
a pattern or an imprint on you. It has changed your psychology. You've had to go through 1,000 pages of
Right.
prose to do that, but you've been clarified and reified by that experience, and that's the sign of a good theory.
Yeah. Well, I guess that depends on what we mean by theory, but I would say that we take those insights and those interpretive insights, and maybe we think, oh, that's what they meant by power, or oh, that's what they meant by some psychosocial relationship or psychosexual relationship, and oh, I can see that, but I don't know. I mean, maybe this is just delving into the esoteric, but it seems to me to be a trap. It seems to me to be an artificial way to impose something. Because look, the whole world, like everything we're doing, we're just primates. We're just apes, right?
Yeah.
And so we have this long history of evolution, and it's pretty freaky that, anybody could walk in here now with a machine gun us down, or anything could happen, right? So we impose a kind of structure on ourselves about the way we think about reality to keep our sanity. We've imposed a structure on us that affords us a kind of ersatz stability, even though it's not stable, even though that this is tenuous, everything is tenuous and ephemeral. And I think that's a trap that people get into. What they should be thinking about is epistemology and not theory, right? They should be thinking about, your epistemology should precede literally everything in your life.
Can you be a bit more specific about epistemology in that
Yeah,
context?
I mean, so how you know what you think you know. It's like, sometimes I meet an activist, someone who's, like I'm an activist for the Israeli-Palestinian problem, or they're shouting from the river to the sea. What river? I'm not sure. What sea? Don't really know. So, before you decide to be an activist for something, you need to know that you're being an activist for the right thing. So you need to work on your ability to think clearly about things and reason well, and your epistemology should precede everything. And that's why I'm a little bit suspicious, to say the least, of this imposition of some external structures on the way people think about things to navigate reality.
Sure, but I mean, let us set up a few axioms.
Okay.
There are smart people out there. There are people who have experience of the world, and you can know what they have said by talking to them, listening to them, seeing what they have written down. Does that strike you as egregious?
No. It
Okay.
strikes me as important to be informed,
Yeah.
even if it's wrong, even if the way they're viewing the world is wrong.
Yeah, But they are the closest to the problem of knowledge that we've just described. Like the problem of knowledge is always like, okay, how do I do this? I'm confronted with an obstacle. What's the answer to the obstacle?
Yeah.
And the best answer is almost always heuristic. It is someone else has done something a bit like this.
Right. That's what you do in a dissertation. Yeah.
Yeah.
You find out who's done the research on the thing beforehand, and then you delve into it.
Yeah. And, if you look at, I guess, sort of management theory, the theory of kind of mega projects is basically like never build a bridge or a tunnel or a skyscraper unless the people on your team have done something almost the most similar before, because you will run into all kinds of problems that your theory of how you do this did not account for. And it is the sort of lived, almost embodied experience of doing that then allows that.
Yeah, so that's a really, really good example, because in the case of a skyscraper or a bridge, you're talking about an objective phenomenon in which embodied in the phenomenon is the objective of the skyscraper not falling down, leaving aside for just the insanity of fire departments not putting out fires but hiring diverse people. Like most people would think, no, you don't want the bridge to fall down. I mean, a reasonable assumption would be kind of embedded in the idea of a bridge itself, as it shouldn't fall down, or a skyscraper. The difference in that is there's an objectively shared knowable world in which people participate in and they agree upon the goals. So we know that the theories, if you will, although I don't like the term there, but we know that there are certain processes that one can use to get to, my dad was a civil engineer, to construct, for example, a suspension bridge to make it less likely that cars going over it will fall into the wherever it's going, the ocean or whatever. That's, I think, disanalogous to the way people impose structures on themselves. Like, I'm just thinking about critical social justice, which we've all experienced the last 10 years. They've just imposed upon themselves that racism is the ordinary and everyday state of affairs. Like, that's the lens they view the world, and they go through. You mentioned madrasas before, kind of a religious interpretation, particularly a more fundamentalist interpretation. You've imposed a structure on yourself. So you couldn't do that. It would be literally impossible, or I think literally impossible. I have to think about it, but it'd be almost impossible to do that if you had cleaned up your epistemology in the first place. You wouldn't believe that men could become pregnant. Like, you wouldn't believe crazy shit. The difference is it's disanalogous to a bridge or a skyscraper.
No, I think you're talking about sort of quite different phenomena, but I think there is a sense that like there is a kind of a bedrock of reality, and then there is gravel, and then there is soft clay. And
that's a good way to think about it.
Soft clay, there is like, a man is a woman, dude, deal with it. And so long as various hard systems continue to function around that, life can go on. For instance, the plumbing works, and there isn't a thermonuclear war, etc. But all of those are related. They're all sort of happening at the same time. And obviously, the more of the kind of the man as a woman theory we produce, and the more deranged our institutions become,
true.
the worse the world will work overall, and that's sort of what we're seeing in the West now in some ways.
I just want to be clear, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't have principles as we walk through life, like be kind, or, if you mentioned jiu-jitsu, like be on top. It's always better to be on top in a fight than on the bottom. Like literally always. I don't care. It's just a universal rule. So you can walk through life and have very specific principles that you apply in the context of given situations. I think that's, I don't know, is that what you mean by theory? Is that, maybe we're talking past each other. Do you mean just you have a suite of principles in which you apply those principles to various social and personal engagements? Like, be kind, don't be a dick.
I don't know if I'm talking about like my personal engagements in my personal life. Like, I guess, I have theory of mind. I have a theory of interpersonal empathy. I have all kinds of theories about like how to turn up on time, maybe, and stuff like that.
How would you know if your theories, the theories you hold, are the theories you should hold?
Well, that's always interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
And there was a man called Nicholas Elwise who wrote a very good book. It's called Mindwise. Nicholas Elpley, have you heard of it?
Yeah.
And you have, clearly. But like, he sort of is one of the subject experts in the psychology of theory of mind, and he kind of runs you through in the first half of the book all of these experiments about we tested people on this and on that, and the conclusion he comes through is that like even in couples where they've known each other for years, they share all the same hobbies, their capacity to predict what their partner will think of X or Y is at best limited. And so the conclusion he then comes to in the second half of the book is the best theory of mind is to ask. And I guess sort of a sub-node off of that is that not to ask is to plan to fail. And that's kind of what most people do most of their lives.
That's very, very interesting. I realize saying this, I can be easily accused of myself falling into a theory. It seems like a very male thing to say. Because women, in general, from my experience of relationships, they want you to anticipate and know. They don't want you to have to like and listen. You know, you ever see the video, It's Not About the Nail?
No.
This is one of the most important videos you can ever watch. Just a single video explains male-female relationships better than anything I've ever seen. So, you know, are you, if I, you don't mind me asking, are you straight?
Yeah.
Okay. So when you are in a relationship with a woman, it's not about a solution, however obvious and idiotic the solution is. It's about listening and affirming, right? It's just a different, I hate to use the word gendered way because it's been so toxic and poisoned, but I don't know, that seemed like a very male way to think about things. Although that's how I think about things is if I have questions, ask. But often in use my interpersonal relationships, people they just want you to know. For example, when you go to a restaurant, she wants you to know what she likes because it shows that you're attentive to her as a person.
Yes, and there's something that women are kind of maximizing for there. I mean, I think, women want to know what you're thinking. I don't know, do they ever turn to you in a relationship and go, what are you thinking? And it is that idea that like they are trying to build a kind of a deep connection, psychological model of who you are and what you think of me. You know, I don't think it's necessarily reciprocated. I don't really in relationships spend an awful lot of time going, what do you think of me? Do you really like me? Maybe I'm a bit more like you in that regard, but like women do have that tendency. They have a kind of a deep need to kind of like bond, you might say. Yeah.
Who breaks up with whom in your relationships? Are you the break-upper or the break-uppy, or both?
I'm probably the break-upper.
So let me ask you an unrelated question. I've noticed, how many times have we hung out? 4 or 5 times, maybe 6 times?
Sure. Yeah.
So I've noticed your vocabulary is quite good. And I've noticed when I speak to educated Brits, their vocabulary is quite good. Now, when I speak to educated Americans, their vocabulary is also good. But it's always like, Andrew Doyle is a good friend of mine.
Yeah.
Almost every time I talk to him, he'll say a word, and I'll be like, oh, wow. I mean, I'll know the word. I'm like, wow, I've only seen it written. Why do you think that educated Brits have such good vocabularies?
The culture places a premium on that. I mean, the culture is much less direct. It's slightly esoteric. It's about word play. There are various traditions that kind of feed into that, from, I don't know, BBC Radio 4 to the school system to just English irony. It's a culture built around taking a line for a walk verbally. That's...
Do you hear words you don't know in English now?
Seldom, occasionally, yeah.
And when you do you look them up?
Yeah, I do, yeah. I like a new word, yeah.
So did you get your vocabulary just from being in this cultural soup, like the cultural chowder? Or did you get your vocabulary from just reading and looking up words?
I think I'm a bit more of a reader and a looker-upper. But you're always swimming in the soup. I mean, I'm kind of an interesting fish in that I am kind of a Brit manqué. My parents are English, but I was born and raised in South Africa. So
I hear it in your accent. Yeah.
Do you? Yeah. It sort of.
I think the first time I asked you is where are you from? I couldn't place it.
Yeah. Kind of sometimes renders as American in some twang, but yeah. I mean, I guess I, as a person, sort of spent a lot of time trying to become more English, and I've spent, 15 years living in England as an adult, and that's kind of my life story. Is like I
most of your
went back to the mother country.
Where are you most of your friends from?
Well, half and half at this point. Yeah.
You mean America and England, or what?
Well, England and South Africa. Yeah.
Oh, England and South Africa. Yeah. What do you think of Americans?
What do I think of Americans? I kind of love America. I mean, every time I go to America, should I say, as we say in England. Yeah. I just delight in the culture in lots of those sort of stupid, plastic, naive ways that Brits do delight in America. I go to Vegas and I just think, isn't this marvelous? Whereas I think if I was some snooty East Coast American, I'd be like, isn't this terrible?
Yeah. What are you doing in Hungary?
I am working for the Danube Institute. I am a media fellow. So
what does that mean?
Well, it means I kind of help on the media team, podcasts and the like, and I sort of write stuff for the British media, and I'm putting this seminar on in a few weeks' time.
About Dominic Cummings.
Yeah. I float around. I network. I simply am. Yeah.
You love it here.
Yes.
I love it here too. What do you love about here? What do you love about it here?
It's kind of another world. It's sort of prelapsarian. It's antediluvian, you might say. It has that feel of a society and a system that somehow works. And I think in Britain, I've been living in a seaside town called Southend for the past 5 years. And I have kind of watched it collapse into the sea as the British economy kind of imploded under COVID, and then under the Boris wave of mass migration, and then the general sort of sag of the rule of law.
The Boris, the Tony Blair. But anyway, go
ahead.
I
mean, there are longer term trends here, but basically, like, Britain has a uniquely pungent combination of being unaffordable and low rent and kind of increasingly consumed by its own social enemy, and to have this kind of like, I don't know, Eeyore-ish, mephitic kind of gloom to the place, which has always been, a thread in the English culture, but it used to feel, a kind of dour in a kind of a rain-coated 1970s way, and now it just feels kind of pathetic and abject.
Do you take public transport here?
I do, yeah.
I just love it. It's become my happy place. I get it. Like last night, I went to someone's home, a buddy of mine, and I got on the tram, got off the tram, got on the bus, rode the bus, got off the bus. It was awesome. It was like nobody's taking a shit on the bus. No crazy people on the bus. Nobody has guns waving. Like, so many times I've taken public transportation, I've had horrific. In fact, one of the people from my team was raised in Chicago. She refused to get on public transportation until Reed. You met Reed. Reed and I would get on with her, and she was just like had a kind of deep trauma about her experiences. And I remember when I was in London, I simply could not get over the fact that nobody jumped the turnstiles. I just couldn't get over it. And you could just stand for 2 seconds in New York and see people jumping the turnstiles.
Really? So you're saying the public transport in London is good in that way? I'm
saying that I'm fascinated by how people treat the commons. I think it's completely fascinating. That's why it's a little weird, but I take pictures of bathrooms whenever I go in like a high school. I give a lecture in a high school, or like when I was in Taiwan. I'm fascinated by the public restrooms, how clean they are. In America, the public restrooms are like, you don't want to go in them. And I send my kids those pictures, and I tell them this is what civilization looks like.
Yeah. Well, I guess to sort of slightly push back on the UK thing. I think there are people jumping the turnstiles, and there is increasingly like a problem that we seem to have psychically imported from America, whereby everything in the UK version of Walgreens, Boots, Tesco's, whatever, is behind Perspex cases.
Pause on that. So when I was there many months, we spent a few months each year there, I never saw a single person jump the turnstile. And then I mentioned my buddy, Andrew Doyle. I said to him, I can't believe this. I've never seen anybody jump the turnstile, because I had just come from New York, and like literally you could just sit there and just watch people. It's kind of the corrosion of the rule of law. And when you move from a high trust to a medium trust to a low trust society. And he said, well, I can't remember how old he is. I'm 40 something. I've never seen anybody jump the turnstile. It completely blew my mind. I mean, people just treat the commons so much better than Americans treat the commons. In general, there are exceptions to that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, the American commons, but like I feel like when I was about to come here and leaving Britain, it seemed to me that like I would get on the train from Southend to London. It was about an hour on the train, right? And there was just sort of increasing disorder. There's always someone playing their phone aloud, and sometimes you challenge them, and you have to sort of steel yourself for that confrontation. And you know, sometimes like someone's kicking off in some other way.
I would just never say anything to anybody. I just keep my headphones on. I look at my phone. I do email, and that's it.
You're part of the problem, then, Peter. I mean, I'm quite militant about this.
Yeah, no one has a gun, though, right?
No one has a gun.
Yeah. So okay.
Okay, yeah. I mean, you're still...
So try that on the New York subway.
Well, I don't know.
Or some other subway.
Yeah, I mean, America has always had that edge. Often that edge in America has led to better kind of commons policing outcomes because it feels like anyone can have a gun, as it were. So.
But I guess, armed neighbors make polite neighbors. But I guess there is something about, all the knife crime. Like, I just can't imagine myself telling someone to turn down their phone or to behave, unless they were actually harassing a passenger. That would be different. But
okay, why on earth not? I mean, I feel very strongly on this. Like, Britain is a place of small civilities.
No more.
No more. Well, precisely. Yeah. And I'm sort of in some Alamo situation trying to fight this last redoubt of I think you've
lost, but yeah.
Well, there you go. Well, I think that is increasing the conclusion that you come to. But when you come to that conclusion, like, what is...
You think you're a high trust society? Okay, let me ask you this question. In 1980, would you characterize Britain as a high trust, low trust, medium trust society?
Yeah, high trust.
Yeah, I would as well.
As late as 1980, yeah.
Okay,
I mean, there is still... I mean, we shouldn't...
All right, hold on. Sorry, I interrupted, but I'm going somewhere with this. So... 2025, would you characterize Britain as a high trust, medium trust, or low trust society?
So I think low trust is kind of a whole other thing. I think it is medium heading low. And I think the future is always unevenly distributed. And I think there are many pockets of wonderful civility that you will find, I don't know, in the provinces, in various places.
Yeah, you don't need... So give me an example.
Yeah.
I feel very strongly about this. I was, one of my last nights in London, I was meeting a friend, and I had my phone out. At the time, I had a phone case in which my cards were on the side, and I was trying to find where the restaurant, where it was. Someone came by on a bike who had a mask on and ripped the phone out of my hands. Fortunately, they didn't get it, and the phone dropped. So you only need, I can't remember, I read something about this, but like India, for example, is a low trust society. You only need a small number of people to move the society from high trust to medium trust.
Yes.
So I don't want to violate my principle, if you will, and be a dick, but basically you did this to yourselves, right? You did this to yourselves.
Okay, I'm not quite entirely sure what you mean by that, but I think that, yeah, it is true that, like, it is becoming an increasingly low trust society in that. Like, if you go up Oxford Street, Tottenham Court Road, this sort of central London, you just kind of get out of the tube, the beautiful new Elizabeth line tube that they built, and you can just kind of feel a certain crackle in the air that's not a friendly crackle. And that's almost what you're describing. It's not even particularly acts. It's a sense of, like, who is policing the commons and what are the commons for? And we are all mammals, as we've kind of talked about a bit. And we're all kind of, there's this kind of a 30-yard, a 50-yard stare where you're like, okay, what is the situation here? Okay, so
the reason that you would, so what would cause you to tell someone to behave on the subway or on the tube? What would that be?
Well, I think there are sort of several parameters. I mean, the sort of upper buffer
Just give me an example.
Well, normally it's people who play their phones aloud, which is like
that's just shocking to me.
Yeah,
I'm just flabbergasted.
Why?
It would never do that.
You would never challenge someone, or you would never play a phone aloud?
Well, I would never play a phone loud. I would have my headphones, and if for whatever reason I forgot my headphones, I just wouldn't play the volume. You realize that someone could just pull a knife out and stab you.
Yeah, and you wouldn't challenge those people. I think this is the point. It's like there is a certain sort of upper threshold. I don't know if it's particularly as a man, but you kind of like have a sense of like, okay, this person could do some serious damage to me, or okay, I think if this got tasty,
okay.
it'd be kind of fine.
Okay, so that's interesting to me. So you wouldn't do it if you made an assessment of the situation. I can't remember the what is it, the thing that you said that from Dominic Cummings took the fighter pilot? What was it?
Okay,
the
OODA loop.
Yeah.
Kind of.
So you wouldn't do it if it were a group of young kids being rowdy on the train.
Yeah, if I felt those kids had like real menace to them, there's a kind of there are kids who like you just impose a bit of adulthood on them, and you do it in the right way.
So the moment that you say that you wouldn't do it to those rowdy kids, it doesn't matter who else you do it to, you'll never solve the problem. Because it's the people who do the most damage who need the most cracking down on, not the person who plays their phone loud.
Well, it's a bit of both though, isn't it? You're creating a false dichotomy.
How so?
Well, because everyone is less likely to do it if the tone of the carriage is more policed.
I agree. And if nobody says anything to the hood, like we got on the T one day, the tube one day, and these, I don't know, they weren't speaking English, but these people were incredibly rowdy, like radically inappropriate. They weren't hurting anybody, but they were like yelling at people and stuff. Even they didn't jump the turnstile. Even these guys didn't jump the turnstile.
You're putting a lot of faith in jumping or not jumping the turnstile.
But it's interesting to me, so they didn't jump the turnstile, but they act like savages on the train.
Sure, yeah. I mean,
so they had a kind of some weird, I mean, that like you wouldn't see that in the United States. You'd see anybody who would behave like that would also jump the turnstile. It's like asking a murderer, are you a liar? Like, well, if they're, like, are you an axe murderer? Well, if the guy's an axe murderer, he's also going to be a liar.
Yeah.
So it was just weird. It was just weird to me.
I don't know, man. Like, there's plenty of social enemy to go around.
Yeah. So just one more thing on that, and then I'm amazed when I watch these videos on Twitter, and now the algorithm keeps feeding them to me. I'm amazed by these people who literally know nothing about fighting, picking fights.
Okay.
It's just shocking to me. Like the kind of hubris that they have, thinking that they're, macho men or tough guys. But there is something, I think, and please push back on this if you disagree, I think everybody should be in a situation in which they're getting choked into unconsciousness, in which they're having someone on top of them really trying to hurt them. And I think that if everybody had that experience, it will teach them that violence isn't a joke. It will teach them that this is serious shit, and it is just agony to experience that. I think it would be far better for society in aggregate than attempting to police people's behavior if people had this experience. Because I do think that some people kind of, I don't know, they've miscalibrated how horrible violence is in their head. Like, let me give you an example. I was thinking about that meeting with Zelensky in the White House with Vance that went so terrible. So when I was in Florida, I have a buddy over there, Luke Radowski, that we go to tactical training together. And if you've never done tactical training, I'm telling you, it is unbelievable. So basically, you get Glock, all different types of guns, and the instructors have, rifles. And these guys, this is all these people do, and they shoot BBs. And these things hurt like fuck. And you go to this training, and you'll have two types of training, and then, you'll shoot at these targets, and then you go to this massive warehouse, and it has it's like post-apocalyptic, burned out cars, and you have gear and your eyes are covered, but it is insanely painful. I had welts all over my body. I think that experience of trying to so we had an objective, and I went in, and literally the first time I'm getting tagged in the head and my arms, I forgot the objective within 20 seconds after being pelted. So I'm running around, I'm exhausted, people are shooting me, the main instructors are, I don't even know who's on my team. But my point is that I could stop that anytime I want. Those were, admittedly, they hurt. They were insanely painful, but they're still BBs. They're not bullets. And I think that we forget the horrors of war. And I saw, Zelensky, and I'm like, well, that dude, maybe he's not been running around with a gun, but he's had this incredible psychological pressure on him. And I think people are very capricious with war, violence. Like, I don't know. I think when you place yourself in those situations, like that's the other reason I would just never go up to someone like that. Because I realize how horrific it could be if just one or two of these people, like you don't know what someone knows by looking at them. You don't know if someone's crazy. You don't know if they're just going to start stabbing you in the head.
Okay, but there's sort of several points in there. I mean, I guess one is that, yeah, at the top line, like you can run from reality, but you can't run from the consequences of running from reality, etc.
Yeah.
Like society is ultimately mediated by male violence.
Correct.
And that's kind of what you're talking about. And more men maybe should get in that game. And I'd like to know from you whether you think like more boys should just be in kind of fist fights. And like we're sort of raising a generation who are maybe like slightly more distanced from that in terms of like even the kind of hierarchical stuff of like bullying. And it's like bullying is bad, but some bullying is like a sense of like, no, you're not here, you are there. And if you do this...
that's the epistemology thing. You have to make sure you bully people for the right reasons if bullying is good in the first place. Because you don't want to bully people for being gay or what have you, but you want to exert some social pressure. But it also seems to me there's something else going on in this conversation. And that is you, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't want to put words in your mouth, you are far more hopeful that you can stop the decay in your society from going to a low trust society, whereas I am not. I think it's over for you.
Okay, well, I think it's a sort of a deontological versus utilitarian argument, and I would say that you are, I don't want to over-characterize you, Peter, but you're kind of a bit of a hardcore utilitarian in that sense, and a hardcore atheist, and maybe all these things kind of run together. Whereas, if we put it back in the language of game theory, it's like you are playing like the sub game and I'm playing the master game. I'm saying that if everyone plays the game that you play, the outcome is much worse for everyone.
Yeah, that's not an argument that I shouldn't play my game.
Well,
that's just an argument that,
But
that's an argument
thing,
that some people should play your game.
Well, that's the argument there is, a sufficiency of people should play my game. But if you want to run away from the game, fine. But that doesn't mean that you're not a part of society and that you aren't, the inheritor of, the Burkean bargain, whatever you want to call it. And that we shouldn't all kind of club together. Like male power has often been used throughout history to club together and create a new equilibrium, the Hobbesian bargain, you might say.
I guess and again, if I'm just superimposing my conception of this on you, let me know. It just seems to me that you are, I don't want to say Pollyannish because that's somewhat of a judgment, but you are far more optimistic about the fate of your society than I am. I think you're completely doomed. There's nothing you can do. You're just completely doomed.
Right. Okay.
And you don't, you just, no offense, but you don't see it. So why would you stop anybody on the subway from doing crazy shit if you can't even stop? There are 2,000 people every 10 days who come over illegally in boats. So what are you gonna do? Someone's playing the phone and you're gonna tell them lower the phone, and meanwhile you have pedophiles, rapists, murder. You don't even know who the hell these people are coming in your country, and you have no political will to stop it. There's nothing you can do. You're running massive deficits. I mean, it's over. So why bother to tell someone to lower their phone? You're fucked. What's the point?
Well, I think on the micro point, I guess, maybe I am Pollyanna-ish, and there is something, I don't know, slightly poetical about having a doomed cleavage to, and it kind of goes back to the point about, deontology. It's like, if I do it, I'm okay with me, and I can hold my head up, Peter. Can you say the same? I'm not so sure.
Well, I'm 100% sure I can, because I pick my battles, and one battle would not be on a subway as a 58-year-old man. It would be something in the intellectual arena, or something in which I can make more of a substantive contribution to help humanity. It wouldn't be to tell someone to turn their phone down. But it's also, I am bullish on humanity in general, but I'm super bearish on the UK and Western Europe. I'm also bullish on Eastern Europe.
I did get into a fist fight with some Albanians over whether they should pick up their litter after them. So I guess maybe that speaks a little to your thesis.
What happened?
Well, it was sort of kind of mid-COVID, I suppose, and I just kind of saw this guy like throw this bottle into the grass of this parkland in Southend. I kind of picked up the bottle and said, "Hey, you dropped this," and he was like, "Yeah," and I was like, "Well, you should pick it up," and I threw it back at him. And in that moment, a sort of instinctive reaction, I suddenly realized that it's not one guy; he's got his two bros with him, and like as I sort of threw it, he sort of caught it in his breadbasket, and the three of them went "ooh," and I was like, "Oh dear, I think I've overcalculated here." And I guess the sort of short version of that is that
It was fisticuffs.
yeah, kinda, yeah.
You guys swapped blows.
He hit me, yeah, and I hit him back, and then we kind of left it at that. It was like, but he got the better of me basically, and I was not prepared to like properly engage. I was like, okay, let's have a symbolic exchange of blows, and I think that was enough for him with his friends and his Albanian honor code or whatever. So I guess it was kind of chastening in that sense of like, oh yeah, this isn't like a free ride, and I did act in anger. And
here's my question to you: do you think your actions made it less likely that he would do that again in the future?
Yes.
See, I don't. I guess it's an empirical question, but I don't.
Okay.
I mean, I could be totally wrong about that.
Okay.
Because anybody who's going to do that in the future, they're just that kind of person. He's just that kind of person who's had those lived experiences. It's not even his country. So what does he care?
Yeah. What does he care? But he knows that people are watching him. I think that's the other thing. Like, we all have that voice in our head.
And
like,
obviously,
are people watching me or aren't
he
they?
doesn't care enough that people are watching him because he committed assault.
There's that. But it's not that I can solve the whole problem right then and there. But it's that someone is still out there doing something. And I don't know, almost to get back to your point of Britain is sinking into the mire.
Is it that not obvious to you?
Well, why do you think I'm here? It is that sense of like, I just needed a holiday from feeling incredibly bleak about, the civilization. And not so much the civilization, just the kind of like the gaslighting sense, you might say. The kind of "this is fine" meme version of it, where people, and as a slight interloper, as an outsider, as a man of British heritage who came back to Britain, I feel like I have a much more clear lens on like, this is crazy, you shouldn't be doing any of this. The education, the deficit spending, the migration, blah, blah, the blob not working, as we sort of started out.
And then look at the
talking
people like Catherine Burblesing in Michaela School in London who are actually trying to do something to solve the problem. It's 100% minority, 50% Muslim, and she's getting shit from everybody.
Yeah, well, this is the insanity of it in that, like, I have problems with the Michaela model. I think it's not for everyone and it's not for every situation, but there are timeless principles which she has, encoded in there
And look at the kids. I mean, this is a separate conversation, but what kind of future are those kids going to have if it weren't for her? I can tell you that it would be bleak. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you it's for 100% of the people all the time, but like the no phones, no talking in the corridor, no phones in the classroom, and Height, et cetera, has popularized that. We're moving toward that. University of Austin, Texas, has no phones in the classroom either. But anyway, there are people who are attempting to solve the problems and the entrenched interest in the systems. I think you said before at one point, you used the word elites. The Minister of Education, the entrenched systems interests make it very difficult for people who are trying to solve the problems. I mean, I just look at the idea that people who post memes, they're getting in trouble with the police now. That's completely insane to me.
Yeah.
Or for reporting factual data on things. But don't get me wrong. Look, I just want to be like totally forthright and clear with you. I'm a huge fan of your people. Like, I grew up with The Who. I grew up with, like, Doctor Who is my favorite. I grew up with British television. I love your island. I love your people. But I think you've made some horrific choices, and you continue to make some horrific choices with censorship. But the migration thing is the big one, and the deficits are the second one. Maybe you'll have a DOGE. I don't know. I hope you do.
Well, that would be interesting. Yeah, but I think it is interesting because Britain has given the world a lot of these timeless principles. And you go back to the Michaela thing, and it's like, from what I understand, like Catherine Birbalsingh had sort of Barbadian heritage and
Correct.
took some of the principles from the schools that work well out there and brought them back to the mother country. But those are essentially kind of English grammar schools of the interwar years principles. And you see that with so many things, with free speech. It's like now J.D. Vance has to come to Europe and bang his fist on the desk. And
Which, by the way, that's exactly the kind of speech a Democrat would have given 20 years ago.
Yes, and that reversal is, interesting, and I think it follows power flows. I think if you, read Moldbug or whatever, it's like free speech is always prioritized by the side that is outside and ascendant. And so 20 years ago, that was the Democrats. And because what do you want free speech for? You wanted to speak against the regime. And that's what Vance wishes for Europe, put it that way.
Mm. So you're in Hungary because you need a little reprieve from the UK?
Yeah, various life events, and I am a refugee from all kinds of things, and here I am living my best life in Urbanistan in
It does seem like you're
the
living your best
dictatorship
life.
of Orban. And looking at another paradigm, another way of thinking about the world. And I'm a sort of inveterate, traveler, and I lived in the south of France for about 18 months, and I like to be away. I like to see the world through different eyes.
Last question: is there anything? Two questions. One, did you want to ask me any questions? Is one, and the second one is there anything I should have asked you but didn't ask you? So do you want to ask me any? Is there anything you want? Or we talked about it all? And is there anything I should have asked you that I didn't?
Not at all.
All right, so we're good?
Yeah.
All right, cool. Thanks.
Great.
Appreciate it. All right, thanks, everybody. Keep watching.